Good morning, Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com here with your Hurricane Pro in HD video discussion for the 16th of May, 2017. It is now officially the beginning of the East Pacific hurricane season, and as such, we'll take a look at what's going on out there, which is not much for the time being, but there are a few things that we can talk about nevertheless. First of all, I'll look at the sea surface temperature anomalies for this week. This map updated yesterday, and we can see in the eastern Pacific a little bit warmer than normal sea surface temperatures, especially down here along the equatorial region. However, this area we usually don't see development taking place in. It's more in this region that what we call the genesis area would occur. So these anomalies down here along the equator really more related to the ENSO, or El Nino Southern Oscillation phenomenon, and this will wax and wane over time. It's pretty susceptible to some dramatic swings, either cooler or warmer than average, and right now it's just a little bit warmer than it should be. And the rest of the ENSO regions, this is divided up into kind of like 1 and 2 here, 3 is over here, 4 is over here, and then Nino 3.4 in there. What does all that mean? Well, that's just the ENSO regions that climate prediction folks watch, and it's divided up kind of like Venn diagrams are to separate different features when you're looking at mathematics or other properties. And the Pacific can be the same way, and a big area that we watch is sort of this region right through here, this ENSO 3.4 area. And it's generally averaging just a little bit warmer than average overall. There's a few pockets of cold anomalies sitting in here, but overall nothing too startling on the plus or minus side right now. In the Atlantic, things are pretty warm in the main development region between Africa and the Lesser Antilles. The subtropical Atlantic as a whole, with the exception of the Northwest Atlantic, this is running pretty cold compared to average, and that could have some implications if this holds for another 60 to 90 days once we get into the peak of the Atlantic season. But you know what? The Atlantic season has not begun officially yet, so we won't worry too much about it. Looking ahead, the different probabilistic ENSO forecasts from the Climate Prediction Center, this too just coming out in the last couple of weeks or so. And this is the area, the time frame that we are most interested in, August, September, October. And you can see that the probability of neutral slightly, kind of by a nose, right? Slightly, there it is there, green is neutral, just a little bit above the probability of El Nino. So it's just slightly more likely that we'll see neutral conditions in the tropical Pacific during the peak of the season than El Nino conditions. So we'll see, right? And a lot has to do with that forecast in terms of what we see in the Atlantic and in the Pacific, because a warmer than normal Pacific, generally speaking, even though it's in the equatorial region that we look for when we're talking about El Nino, a warmer Pacific obviously would generally mean more tropical activity in that region. Speaking of tropical activity, I want to show you some climatology. May 1st through the 10th, obviously we are well past that time frame, but you get the idea. There were no named storms during this time period in the eastern Pacific. We had 2 in the Atlantic basin, so why don't we just start the Atlantic hurricane season in May? Well, I don't have an answer for that. Nobody seems to. I wouldn't know who to approach, to say, hey, let's have hurricane season begin in May, because we did have a couple of points. But, we're going back to 1851. Now, granted, that's well before satellite era, obviously, through 2015 here, and there's only 2. So those are kind of outliers, and those don't really, I guess, make a trend enough for there to be consideration for at least the first 10 days. Well, what about the second 10 days? Well, now we have more activity in the Atlantic basin, and we have several areas here in the Pacific. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 in the Atlantic, and 2, 5, 7, 9, 10 in the Pacific. So they're equal. Well, why not have the hurricane season for both basins begin around mid-May, May 15th? Again, I mean, there's equal distribution. You can see it here. This is, scientific, right? I don't know. It's going to be interesting. I'm going to find somebody one day that can explain this to me in a way that I can understand it. You can't say, well, there's more activity in the Pacific than the Atlantic. Maybe more hurricanes in this time frame, and maybe that's the crucial element here. These are named storms and hurricanes, not just hurricanes or tropical storms. It's tropical cyclones, and I don't think this includes depressions. So, and you know what? We added one more, right, just recently down here with Adrian. So maybe this now wins as 11 to 10 favoring the Pacific. Anyway, moving on through the next 10 days, what do we have to look forward to? Well, here, it definitely outweighs the Atlantic Basin. As we end the month of May, the last third of the month comes up with quite a bit more activity centered just south of Mexico here, pretty concentrated, and then just a few scattered points of origin across the Atlantic Basin as we get ready to begin the Atlantic hurricane season on June the 1st. So maybe someday they'll dial it back a little bit or move it, to May 15th. We'll see. What's happening out there right now? Well, not a darn thing. No worries. If you have any travel plans to the Baja or Acapulco, Zihuatanejo, you name it, down to the Gulf of Tehuantepec, Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, and Panama, all of this area, even the intertropical convergence zone through here, where the trades from the northern hemisphere meet up with the trades from the southern hemisphere, really not leading to much upward motion or cloudiness. And you can see on the infrared shot of the southeast Pacific, this would be Guatemala here, this would be El Salvador, and you can see even south of there, really nothing going on. This is where Adrian formed, and it's pretty much gone. All the energy from that stripped away by strong upper level winds and a wider perspective going all the way out. This is Hawaii, and you can see really squashed convection overall. Convection is a fancy word for thunderstorms or upward motion in the atmosphere, like a convection oven has heat, and right now there's not much in the way of heat release in the tropics, at least in this part of the world. Not much going on, so it's going to be pretty quiet the rest of the week. All right, so since it will be pretty quiet, I will be in once a week, usually Monday or Tuesday of each week, and then when we have something brewing to talk about, and this will go for the Atlantic side as well, I'll be in more frequently to give you a post, hopefully with not such a, I don't even have a sore throat. I know you can tell there's a difference here. It's just some laryngitis allergy issue. I don't even have a sore throat. It's just annoying. But anyhow, yeah, once a week unless things start to bubble. And, that'll happen eventually. And then we will have a lot more to talk about. As always, we do appreciate you tuning in here at Hurricane Pro and HD. And remember, there are a lot of nice tools in there, including historic archival information from past tracks. So if you're bored, you can check that out in your favorite of those two apps, or maybe you have both of them, depending on your device. Have a great rest of your Tuesday. Thanks again for tuning in. I'm Mark Sedeth for HurricaneTrack.com and for Hurricane Pro and HD, and I'll talk to you again next week.